There's no bigger statement of wealth than owning a luxury yacht. But underneath all that fancy glamour, all those yachts are still impressive feats of engineering and workmanship. So today, let's take a look at what exactly goes into the making of a personal yacht. Construction components. Now, believe it or not, yachts have been around for hundreds of years. That being said, those original yachts are more Navy-oriented than that uber-wealthy tax write-off of today. But the one thing that has remained constant from those days is the three major components of the yacht structure: the hull, the part of the yacht that actually floats in the water, the deck and superstructure, which is the part you see above the hull, including the cabins and the pools and whatnot, and the interior, which is pretty self-explanatory and is what differentiates a yacht from a peasant's sea vessel. All these parts are made separately using separate techniques before being assembled at the very end. So let's now take a look at how each of these is made, starting with the hull. I'm sure that even the most landlocked person can tell you that the hull is the single most crucial element of a yacht, and that even the slightest flaw has the potential to cause millions in damages, not to mention the threat to the lives of people on board if anything can go wrong. This is why shipyards spend a lot of time perfecting the kind of hull they'll be building. Most of the medium-sized ones are made from fiberglass, a watertight but tough material that has greater strength than a lot of metals, while also being significantly lighter. For this purpose, workers used a pre-made mold in the shape of the hull that's eventually supposed to take. For making the actual hull, this mold is first cleaned and checked for any abrasions or dirt that can interfere with the molding process. And once the mold is bone dry, it's finally ready to receive the fiberglass. For this purpose, workers paint a smooth gel coat on the inside of the mold before applying long fiberglass strips around a PVC foam core. The gel coat will eventually deposit onto the completed hull, while the foam acts as guidelines as well as anchors for the fiberglass. The workers also make sure to install a bunch of distribution channels in and around the fiberglass for the next component, the resin. This resin is the material that'll convert the flexible fiberglass and PVC into a dense, rigid, and watertight hull. To apply the resin, the workers first cover the entire mold with a layer of plastic. Then, a series of vacuum pumps are attached to the resin channels to remove any air from the PVC and fiberglass, while at the same time sandwiching everything under an airtight layer of plastic. Finally, once everything is air-free, the resin is pumped into the channels. The air-free and porous materials immediately soak up a ton of this hard resin, while the plastic keeps everything looking smooth and uniform. Workers also keep a close eye out for dry spots where the resin hasn't fully saturated, which have to be relaxed manually for the resin to form a uniform surface. Now, the whole assembly is allowed to solidify. During this process, the resin binds the PVC and the fiberglass into one cohesive, super strong and lightweight mass, which, once fully dried after an entire day of drying, can be separated from the mold. For this, workers slowly remove the plastic tarp to clear out the hull. Then, they remove the attachment points for the pumps, and finally, a crane is used to lift the completed hull from the mold. By this point, the hulls become completely watertight, rigid, and most impressively, already has a glossy, perfect paint job thanks to the coat applied to the mold earlier. For larger yachts, carbon fiber, or Kevlar, is used instead of fiberglass to enhance the strength and rigidity. And in the case of even bigger ones, metals like steel and aluminum are also often used. But whatever the materials of choice are, once the hull is complete, it is brought into another station where workers install things like additional skeletal supports, as well as plumbing and electrical, and most important of all, the engines. And once all these working components have been installed, the hull is finally set aside while workers in another part of the shipyard work on the deck and superstructure. Now, where the hull is a purely functional part of the yacht, the superstructure is where designers really get to show their art. This is why they involve a ton of different materials and techniques in their construction, from wood and glass to metals like aluminum or even titanium. That being said, the basic underlying structure is still made from the same watertight and super lightweight fiberglass or Kevlar resin as the hull. This is to both conserve weight, but also to prevent corrosion at joints. In this workstation, workers line along straight strips of fiberglass onto a surface that has already been covered with reinforcement PVC. Only this time, there's no finishing applied, as that is done with the application of wooden panels. These give the deck a tactile texture that is much harder to slip from as compared to smooth resin, while also lending the deck some much-needed change of color. Once everything has been arranged in a layered pattern, the entire assembly is once again saturated with resin, creating a strong, rigid, but still very glossy and professional-looking deck. The same process is applied to make the walls, the roofs, and any other attachments for the top of the yacht. And once the pieces are all complete, all that's left to do is to buff everything up to a minor shine before cutting out holes for any lights, portholes, and other features. And once that's been done, we can finally move on to the next step, final assembly. Now remember how we mentioned that the third most important part of a yacht is the interior? Well, before that can happen, the company has to finish all the working parts of the yacht, which means assembling it to be seaworthy. For this, the hull is first fixed onto a deck immediately next to the water in the shipyard. After this, a crane is used to lower the deck into the hull before being fastened and sealed using rubber gaskets. The same goes for the plumbing and electrical systems that are then connected across the hull and superstructure. This is also where the bridge of the yacht is installed, and being such an important component, it has to pass the highest level of scrutiny before being checked off. And finally, once all the working systems have been installed, the boat is allowed to gently slip into the water, making it for the first time in its life fully seaworthy. That being said, there's still a couple of things left before it can be delivered to the customer, namely the interior. Now, seeing as these are luxury yachts we're talking about, this is the part of yacht building where the owners really get to do whatever they like, which is also why almost no two yachts in the world have the same interior. That being said, there are a few repeated techniques. For example, some of the bigger yachts out there have multiple rooms utilize pre-made room structures that have been built around an aluminum frame that can be installed as desired. This modular approach is also applied to the windows, doors, electrical outlets, and even the fixtures such as lights and ceiling fans. A whole variety of woods and furniture is also brought on to furnish the space. All the while, the final touches on the exterior are also completed, including the boat's name, the floodlights, as well as attachment points for ropes and other such things. And once all of this is done, all that's left is just one small step: the test drive, or more appropriately, the sea trial, which is usually done for a couple of days in open water, all the while technicians keep an eye out for any faults or leaks. And if the yacht passes all of these tests, it can officially be chartered and sent off to whatever fortunate owner will get to enjoy it for the rest of its life. Click on one of the two videos on your screen right now. We'll catch you guys in the next one.